You're listening to Cloud Security Reinvented, a podcast for security leaders with a focus on the cloud. Learn best practices from fellow security professionals and how they disconnect from it all at the end of the day. Cloud Security Reinvented.
Good morning, or depending on when you are in the world, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. Welcome to Cloud Security Reinvented. I'm your host, Andy Ellis. Before I introduce our guest for the week, a quick word from our sponsor, Orca Security. Orca provides agentless security and compliance for your public cloud infrastructure, enabling you to detect and prioritize security risks in minutes, not months. I'm here today with Nick Vigier, CISO About Town. Welcome, Nick.
How's it going, Andy?
Going really wonderfully today, you joining us. You know, across our careers, I think we as professionals, at least I hope we do, but the world that we're in changes. So where we started our career in today don't look at all the same. And so I love getting insight from our guests, especially in light of the transition from the on-premise world that I think many of us grew up in to the world of cloud that's become the default. And so literally when I say like the on-premise world, you actually started in networking, if I recall, and made the transition to security when you worked for the New York Stock Exchange. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a really interesting journey. I fell in love with networking when I was in college and became this really interesting cross-section of what I would call systems thinking. You have to understand how everything works in order to bring it together, and the protocols were interesting. And so I got my first job exchange working for a company called SIAC that did the American Stock Exchange technology at New York Stock Exchange. And I started there 4 months before 9/11. So the continuity exercise, I was literally going through the security cordon to vacuum gypsum powder out of Bay Networks equipment. So when you talk about the move from on-premise to cloud, this was the most on-premise you could get, and a really learning experience. But I was fortunate that I was sitting next to the pen testing team. There was no room for me next to the comm engineering team. And I would just cruise through my work and have time. And I looked at what they were doing and I was like, that looks really cool. That looks really different. And so I volunteered and after a couple of years, ended up getting brought in where I realized pen testing is an art and I'm not an artist, but fell in love with cybersecurity and everything around it. So it was a really,
Yeah, there's a really neat theme in some other CISOs and people in other environments about this, getting a job opportunity just by sort of volunteering with your peers. Like, oh, hey, your job looks cool. Like, how can I help? What can I learn? And just sometimes taking on work that you're not necessarily suited for. Like you said, you're not the artist, but you learned something you were very excited about. So I love hearing that. And then I think you went to LiquidNet, which was, you spent 8 years there and you ended up in charge of physical and information security. So what was that career journey like inside one company for that long?
So I was really fortunate. The gentleman that brought me into the pen testing team, Al Berg, is been one of my mentors for a long time. And he went over to LiquidNet and said, hey, come over here. It was only a 125 person company, and much more holistic thing. It wasn't just the technical security. It was understanding the business. It was the physical security side of things. I mean, 3 weeks into my time at LiquidNet, I went to Allgood, Tennessee. There's nothing happening in Allgood, Tennessee. And so it's 2 hours from Nashville. But I learned bugs, nonlinear junction detectors, signal analyzers, like all of that, because, hey, let's figure this stuff out. But also taking, access control and CCTV and things along, with security. But then also covering risk management, security engineering, security operations, like really the full gamut. We got the SAS 70 when that first came out, and all those fun things, services sector. So there was a lot of wood to chop, but stick approach security, which I found really fed into my liberal arts mindset. And
I suspect there's probably some things from that physical world that are great analogies for your brain to wrap around when applying it to the IT and cloud world.
It was actually really interesting to bring the kind of like hacker mindset to physical security, because you started to see things in a very different way of like, well, that's how I would break that lock. Most physical security people are literally just looking to make sure that the doors are locking. Okay, but if I blow a can of cold air between the doors and all you have is infrared as your motion detector, now your door's just going to open. So that really put things on its head, like a little bit more of a technology-enabled approach to physical security. But then you bring that back also to the information security side and that brings a whole different, color to.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And then from there, you went to Sony, which is a complicated multinational company. And so where did you fit in the Sony hierarchy? Because as near as I can tell, like Sony owns Sony, which owns Sony and has a subsidiary called Sony.
There's a lot of left pocket, right pocket stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
So I went because I wanted to learn what it was like working for a huge company and to learn budgeting.
Yep.
Most company, like Liquid, smaller company, budgeting was kind of like, how much did we make? How much did we spend? Was this bigger than that? And paired up with an accountant that was helping the budgeting process and taught me everything about budget. It was amazing. And I was there after breach, but before the pictures breach. So during this really quiet period when everybody really wanted to get security done right, and worked for a gentleman, Phil Reitinger, who is also a great mentor of mine.
Yep.
And he brought an amazing group of security professionals and a completely different mindset. He came at it from a legal background as well, so you get that whole color. But yeah, learned that. I had security for a museum, a credit card company, 2 biotech companies, music licensing, printing, and Western Hemisphere data center. So along with Sony Corp of America as the holding company. So it was really a very broad experience from that.
That is fascinating. That sort of gives you sort of the feel for sometimes what a managed services provider might get when you work for a company that's that diverse. And then you've had a couple gigs that are really fascinating because back to back, you were the CISO at DigitalOcean and then the CIO at Gemini. And most recently, you were the CISO at ID.me. And we don't often see people do that CISO, CIO tango. What was that like for you?
So I was at which was a really fascinating experience. And again, a very set of responsibilities. Took that liquid net approach where I was covering everything. And I got a call that was saying, hey, Gemini is looking for a CIO. And at the time I was trying to figure out why CISOs and CIOs don't get along. Like, where's that tension? Where's that coming from? And I really wanted to understand it. So I was actually doing some guerrilla interviewing, pretending to interview companies that I really just wanted to understand why they were hiring a security director or a CISO. And I got a call from Gemini and I was like, why are you calling me? I'm a CISO. They said, well, they have a CISO of some other former CISOs. They're obviously very security minded and you might be a very good fit. And I saw it as a really good opportunity to run a marathon in the other man's shoes. And also roots a little bit of like, and infrastructure and all those fun things. And so, and it was a third-person company when I joined. It was April 2017, and Bitcoin is at $1,000, which sounds really cute right now.
It does.
And it was an amazing helping a company grow and set down the rails for growth and provide people with the safety to do good work. Very hectic environment.
I like that. Our listeners should really grab onto psychological safety to do good work. I think if your people don't feel safe, it's hard for them to do their best work. And so glad that was a focus for you. And then sort of around that, you've also dabbled in what I would like to call sort of the field CISO or sometimes advisory CISO, my gig today, where you're sort of out in customers and helping evangelize your product, but at the same time, helping to make them more secure. So how do you find that different from the role of being a mainline CISO?
So I'm very much a strategic leader. I like to be in a bunch of different problems. I like to try to come up with solutions to them that are going to help drive things forward. In that type of really allows you to touch a variety of different industries, a variety of different mindsets. But my experience is only about 20% of CISOs that you interact with that want to engage. And in my particular case, saying, hey, I'm here to help. You want like an extra, like we have an NDA signed and everything. I know how all of your stuff works. I will literally sit Word deck. I will sit with you and work on your strategy or your budget. It will cost you nothing. And 20% take you up on it. And I would encourage CISOs to reach out to their communities and partner with people. And especially when there are people that are not trying to sell you, but are literally just there to try to help, to take them up on it. It can't hurt. Like, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, no, that's a really valuable. And I think a lot of people, don't take that partnership with the field CISO or even the CISO at a vendor who's often really happy to help build a relationship and invest in you. And they're not trying to sell you today, partly because they recognize that if you think good thoughts about your vendor, then maybe you'll buy more in the future.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for some organizations is trying to figure out how do you measure the value that CISOs are bringing to the table.
Yep.
And what I would argue is that a lot of the value comes in probably like an 18-month life cycle. Like it's a relationship building and a trust building exercise. And over time that yields money. But when you're dealing with the sales organization where they want to see bookings and revenue and all that, it's a lot harder to tie directly to, well, the field CISO did it. Right. Or it's because of the work that, this yielded and overframe.
Although I'll say, if you've dabbled in CIO to see what it's like on the other side, maybe CMO might be your next thing to go experiment with and see the challenges of trying to bring in qualified leads and help manage the pipeline.
Yeah. I think that's like one for me lately type of jobs, and really challenging.
No, I think it's one of the hardest jobs. I work very closely with CMOs in my career, and I would not want that job. And I think CISO is a hard job, but that one seems like it's much more arcane.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, part of the experience from having been a CIO and trying to understand that tension was, everybody's like, oh, being a CISO is so hard. And my response is go try to be a CIO. Like, you are literally trying to lay track as fast as you can so the business doesn't fall off the tracks. And to the CIO, the CISO looks like Hollywood, right? We do stuff is a lot longer tail. Well, it's longer tail. It's more about analysis, but let's have a conversation, and things like that. And to a CIO that's literally just trying to move faster than the business.
While saving money. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's think about how the world has changed across your career. And if I just think about, cloud and how that affected security. So what do you see as sort of the security approach now that, cloud is, whether it's cloud native or cloud first? I had somebody recently tell me he didn't want cloud stupid, which I'm still trying to decide what it means. But how do you see the world of security changing?
I mean, obviously 8 to 10 years ago, it was, oh, cloud, so scared cloud, et cetera. I mean, even my time we started in AWS, and we actually built out physical data centers to deal with latency for high frequency trading. So cloud has changed and whatnot. And since I moved to the cloud, some of these considerations that led to, oh, we have to be on-prem have gone away. It's been really good to see regulators warming up to the cloud, because that's always been a hindrance. I mean, even CMS on the Medicare, Medicaid, very anti-cloud, and now kind of coming around.
Yep.
And that eliminates a lot of those, right? A lot of those like intellectual gut reaction, fight or flight type of conversation, and it makes everything a lot. You can have a much more objective conversation around what is the best approach, and they're obviously a lot more complete. And more mature. So ability to rethink things is great. Cloud have changed.
I think that's really powerful. And then every industry has little quirks that surprise people from the outside. And since you're in between gigs at the moment, CISO about town, you can pick any of the industries you've been in for this one. But what is that surprising thing, especially about cloud security, that's going to be different from the inside than what we see from the outside?
I think everyone thinks that companies are further along in their cloud maturity journey than they really are. Everyone talks about their security or their approach or their infrastructure maturity. And I think that there's a lot of be done, because there's a lot of companies that have, from what I've seen just from the FISO perspective and whatnot, it's you have a lot of companies that did from more physical infrastructures straight into the cloud, and it just doesn't work that way. You can get away with it, but it's going to cost you a lot more. It's going to be a lot more inefficient, and getting cloud native is really what organizations need to be focusing on in a very real sense, which requires a very different set of skills.
Yeah. I think I've noticed people especially do that forklift sort of way, is when you were building inside your data center, your IT and your security did a lot of things for you that the developers never, ever saw. And so you provided security that worked in this, environment where like every network cable goes to the same router. So I can just plug in a tap and I know what's going on.
Yep.
And you can't deploy a server without me putting an agent on it. And when you get into the cloud, like you lose a lot of that friction that created the opportunity for support. And so you forklifted, but you left behind everything, and your developers do not want to change their processes and slow down to like tie an agent into their workload, for instance, right? So I think that lift and shift some work as well as people think.
I think away with it for a while, and at a certain point, if you've taken too long to realize that, you have to have this, come to Jesus moment where you have to realize, oh my God, we have to go and change the way that we've done things.
Yeah.
And that becomes a much more dramatic shift. And some organizations, or sometimes it's too late, or it requires an amount of effort that then you're balancing against a product roadmap, and where's the ROI on that?
Yeah, all the new features are being built by developers who've been ignoring the security tools that you thought worked.
Yep.
And those are the high revenue, so you're not getting in their way.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you look back at the practices that you first learned, right, in that pre-cloud era, which ones of those do you think most resonate today as fundamentals that we need to maintain and get better at?
I mean, I'd hate to reuse Dan Walsh's response. I think it's knowledge management, right? It's all that asset management, knowing where your data is, knowing the context, knowing the value. The great thing from a cloud perspective now is everything's API. So you have the ability to automate a lot of these discoveries. You have the ability to get to ground truth a lot faster in a more dynamic way. And so this is the perennial, this is always the problem. Whether it's, for IAM, for resource management, or whether it's for incident response or what have you, it all comes down to that knowledge management component that, covers, that broad swath, identity and asset management.
Okay, I love that. Those fundamentals. Now, the flip side, what are the things that we used to do and insist everybody do that we ought to have just buried and killed off a long time ago? I
mean, God, I hate third-party risk questionnaires. They're really this exercise that we go through where it's, folks are just lying. They're telling partial truths, or they're saying what they, and the person on the other side oftentimes isn't even looking at the responses. It was just, yep, we did it. And so I'd love to see that be something that becomes more automated in a meaningful way. So obviously some organizations that try to do this to a certain extent, but you end up with reports of oh, hey, here's a domain that has bad SSL certificates. No, that's not mine. Yep. And then it turns into this effort of trying to correct information. So I think if we can point where we can just get rid of or streamline this process in a more effective and real way, to actually deliver meaningful information, I want to see that way.
Yep. Yeah, what I loved about the spreadsheets is they all started from one of a handful of templates. It was the BitSig, or maybe it was ISO 27002. But then every time a company would suffer a breach, they'd go figure out what they thought the root cause was. And they'd be like, oh, we didn't have a question about that. So they'd go add this question to the bottom of the questionnaire. So I would get them when I was Akamai, right? And we filled them out. And it became a game to go take these 5 questions that you hadn't seen before and go figure out and map them back to those companies' breach, to be like, oh, that's how that breach really happened, because you just disclosed to me here in your questionnaire. But they would never ask the hard question, which was how will we shoot ourselves in the foot by using your service? This was really about are you a reasonable company, not am I going to get in trouble because I use this in a dangerous way, rather than the way that you think I should use it.
Yeah I mean, I think it's really challenging that value. I mean, to your point, I think they've all started from a similar point of evolved in this nuclear waste pond that now everybody needs to answer these varieties of questions, and it becomes a massive drain your human.
That it definitely is. So anything you do to streamline that is what vendors end up doing. It's how can I make this as easy as possible? But it's not really how do we provide value to the customer, because the customer doesn't know how to extract any value at that point.
Yep, absolutely.
So when you think about the surprises of the cloud era, I don't think any of us predicted what we have today, but what's the one thing that probably has surprised you the most?
Well, I mean, we talked about the forklifting already. I think that really has surprised me in a lot of ways, and people see that as the digital transformation. It's
does it surprise you that it doesn't work as well as people think it does, or that people are still trying to do it? Or
it's surprised people are still doing to a large extent. It's an
more in
and so it really, I think that's the biggest challenge. Why aren't you, and the benefits, and figuring out people, and making sure the right way. I mean, I think the other big surprise for me is really, through SOC 2 and stuff like that, and realizing that, hey, we're doing all of our infrastructure as code. I can just turn over the logs to my SOC auditor and say, here you go, and never talk to my SREs, and never have to talk to my engineers and the network folks or anything, because everything was defined as code. And that was more of an epiphany of, oh, wow, from a cloud native perspective and an automation perspective, this is what we've been right.
Yeah.
And make things better.
Yeah, no, that I definitely loved. Now, if you look back, everybody wishes they'd gotten some piece of advice earlier than they did. What's the thing you wish somebody had told you early in your career?
Was a lot younger. You have a lot of arrogance and you might come off as a jerk. So a little bit of that self-awareness went a long way. But I think the best piece of advice I've gotten in the last couple of years was I was actually on a tour, and the tour guide said, well, things in Italy are a little bit different. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just different. And that gave me a sense of like all this jumping up and down and wanting people to see things my way. That's not my job. My job's to give them an understanding of ground truth and to help them make an informed decision. And their decision isn't right. It's not wrong. It's just different. And so that allowed me to take a step back from feeling like the decision was personal and more of just comes to the table with different perspectives. As long as I can give them the facts and as long as I can help them understand the risks that they're taking, it's not right. It's not wrong. It's just different.
Yeah, I really love that aspect coming from a tour guide. Because, in a previous job, we are to be a helpful and sustainable guide to our business partners.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I always thought about it was I can't tell you where to go. I can give you some hints. I can tell you where it's dangerous. Like you really shouldn't jump off that cliff. Although maybe the one that's got water underneath it would be okay. But you're going to choose one of 12 different paths. My job is to help you be on that path as safely as you can, not to pick the path for you.
Exactly. And I think taking away a little bit of that, the decision-making process very early. And I think being able to be a little bit more objective about it is certainly very helpful. So that's kind of like my mantra.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So when you think about the future and the opportunities that technologies are going to bring us, what are you most excited about? Like we don't have flying cars yet, but what's your cool thing?
I think for me, I kind of talking about the third-party risk management is the automation, right? So when everything's in the cloud and you're doing things in cloud native ways and infrastructure is defined as code and there are known design patterns from the various cloud providers, et cetera, and you're able to do things like your automated compliance auditing, automated change management, automated infrastructure as code, verification prior to launch, automated remediation, being able to that they do well, right? And that they're awesome at. I think my time at Palantir I came to the realization that there are things that machines do really well, and there are things that people do exceedingly well. People are great at things like some pattern recognition and spotting weird, but they just have to be presented in the right way. And so being able to let the machines, they do well and automate a lot of these things, and then letting the humans go be the creative things that the creative entity business to innovate versus just doing busy work. Or just working harder is, I think, what I'm really excited about. And I try to find ways of doing it every day.
Yeah. So I'm going to summarize that as, letting computers help spot the weird more often.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's actually advice I'd give everybody. If you ever discover something and you're like, that's weird, just keep pulling at it until you really understand it. Because often there'll be surface explanations that people say, oh, you don't have to worry about that. But most of the time, your gut instinct of that being weird meant there's something there for you to learn. Maybe there's no danger, but there's always something really cool there.
I think that humans presented with the right information, you can make decisions exceedingly quickly without having any context, or no advanced analysis. If I send someone an app of everywhere they VPN'd in the last week, it would take a person a quarter of a second to look at the map, basically say, oh, I was never in the last week. If it's a SOC doing it, now they're going to go and have to call the user, and it has to be one of 15 people that it happened to and whatnot. I don't doing that. I can literally just give the user the information and
here's your
looks
picture.
Weird. Yeah. Yep.
And I love that.
And problem solving. But then hands and stay real. The things that help me from things. I love scuba diving. I don't get to do it very often, but I have a portable unit that I bring in pool, for example, in the summertime, and I can just escape from the world for 15 minutes and just focus on my breathing and relax. And then I just Pilates, so I have to strengthen because they've been damaged from playing hockey, so I can get back to playing hockey. Because that's another goalie. The most typical cybersecurity role that you could have on a hockey team.
It is.
Your hips get messed up, but at the time, you have one thing to focus on. It is your only job, and it becomes very meditative to a certain extent, just like scuba diving. So, those are things that.
Awesome. I love those. And now just doesn't have to be about technology, but what's a bit of wisdom that you've encountered that you have that you just want to share with people and have more people hear?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that there's no career ladder. It's a jungle gym. If you look at security in enough sense, it is everything from your engineering work to your product security, application work, your investigations, your incident response, your governance, risk and compliance, privacy, even physical security. And there are one. And I think it's key that like security isn't just pen testing. The number of people that are early in their career that say, I just want to go be a pen tester. Well, as someone who had to go through that for a year and realize that wasn't for me, trying to help people understand where they fit into that journey or what they might have aptitudes for, I think is really, really important. And I think the other way, you got to take it. Everybody's super busy, always more work to do, but you have to pick your head up from time. You have to take a look around and make sure that you're chopping down the right tree. And it's fitting strategy, because what you don't want to do is end up in a situation where you spend 2 years just chopping wood and working as hard as you can, look up and say, I'm still the same person I was 2 years ago. Like, that's not satisfying.
Right. Now, did you effectively make change not only in your organization, but in yourself?
Absolutely. Always look to invest in yourself.
Yeah. No, I really like that. Well, Nick, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. You've been listening to Cloud Security Reinvented. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or just watch us here on the Orca website.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Cloud Security Reinvented, brought to you by Orca Security. Orca Security detects and prioritizes cloud security risks for AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud without the gaps in coverage, alert fatigue, and operational costs of agents. Please follow Cloud Security Reinvented wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit orca.security/podcast to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.